Let's start with your reaction to what we've seen in Manchester today.
Well, obviously, an appalling day. I made worse because it was on one of the Jewish community's most holy days. I'm sure that Manchester will respond defiantly, stoically to this, but it's just an absolute tragedy for the Jewish community and the city of Manchester, which is no stranger, I'm afraid, to these sorts of events.
We don't yet know of any motivation for this, but happening as it has done on the most holy of Jewish days, Yom Kippur, that's been designed, you would think, to have maximum impact.
It has. I'm sure of that. I mean, we need to wait for the proper assessments to be done. But I think this seems to be very obvious, and it's not just the impact of doing that on this very holy day for that community, but many Jewish people will not be on their social media. They will not be on their electronic devices. So getting information, staying in touch with loved ones, all of those things is clearly much more difficult. And I'm sure that would have factored into the thinking from this appallingly evil individual.
Do you think there are people who are wrongfully conflating the actions of the Israeli government with the motivations of Jewish people around the world?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, you can criticize what Israel is doing. You can talk about what is happening in Gaza and be highly critical of that. That is a freedom of speech issue. And Lord Mann and I made it very clear in our report that's not what we're talking about. You're entitled to criticize the actions of a government or what's going on there. But what you can't do is go into work the next day and abuse a work colleague because he is Jewish about that situation. I mean, it's ridiculous to have to explain this to people, but that is the case. And I'm afraid that we've seen in trade unions, in particular public sector bodies, in the arts sector as well, we've seen this sort of attitude that it's okay, that it's fashionable, that it should be permitted, that you can go and abuse a particular religious group or ethnic group in this way. That is not the case, and we just have to educate people that is the case. And where people persist in this vile behaviour, we need to stamp it out, and clearly more is needed to do that.
I'm glad you said a particular religious group or ethnic group, because, of course, this isn't just confined to anti-Semitism. It's people who are anti-Muslim and anti-Christian, anti-lots of things. Do you think the tenor of public discourse at the moment is so polarising that it's allowing people to think that prejudice is more acceptable these days?
Well, of course. I mean, there are lots of groups that suffer from abuse and intimidation and name calling and a whole raft of things. But I do think the Jewish community is an exceptional case because you don't have to repeatedly argue why it's not okay to abuse other groups. It's an obvious point. But as you just pointed out, people conflate the actions of Israel, and particular political stance that its government might be taking, and your criticism of that, with just abusing a particular ethnic or religious group. And so I do think that there is a particular case and a particular problem with anti-Semitism. And that's why we need utter clarity from government, but our public services, to ensure that anyone employed by those organisations understands what their obligation is to the general public. And we've made some very clear and simple and straightforward recommendations that should take no time at all to implement for those public sector bodies, so that everyone in our country can feel confident about going about their daily lives and using those public services.
Of course, there's been widespread condemnation of what happened today from all groups and across the political spectrum, and of course, outside of the UK as well. I'd like to draw your attention to the response of Gideon Saar, Israel's foreign minister, who posted a lengthy post on social media, but in particular, He said the authorities in Britain have failed to take the necessary action to curb this toxic wave of anti-Semitism and have effectively allowed it to persist. During your research into this, did you find evidence of what he's claiming?
So look, you can find evidence of that environment. I mean, just last night in London, there were some pretty horrible protests on the streets, which people would have found very intimidating and unsettling. So we know this is going on. It's going on in our cities. It's going on in our communities. We found good and bad practice by local authorities and the police. We want more consistency in tackling that, and we've made some recommendations around that. But I think there are
Back with
some other things too.
I just want to finish off on a different point.
Of this
Sorry to
government.
interrupt.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to finish off on a different point, Penny Mourdant, if I may, and it relates to what Gideon Saar says. He says there needs to be more effective action, enforcement against the rampant anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli incitement in Britain. Do you think the Israeli government wants to conflate the criticism of it with anti-Semitism? Does it suit them to make all criticism of the Israeli government anti-Semitic as well?
Well, I can't say what they are seeking to do. What I can say is that we need to be clear. These are two separate issues. You can be critical of what the government in Israel is doing and the situation of Gaza. That is not a license to then go and abuse some of your fellow countrymen just because they are Jewish. That is, we have to be completely clear about that. And we need our government to be completely clear about that. And particularly in the public sector, where we know there are still problems with anti-Semitism, particularly in the NHS, within trade unions, particularly in education and independent social work. Those issues need to be gripped. And if those public bodies, professional bodies and trade unions won't sort it out, the government needs to. It needs to implement our recommendations, and we need to take seriously the rise of anti-Semitism that has been happening over the last few years.